Welcome to Wealth Beyond the White Coat, a show where we dive deep into the world of financial freedom for dentists and medical professionals. I'm your host, Deren Flesher, a dentist with a passion for uncovering the strategies that lead to a prosperous life beyond the office. Every episode will explore the avenues of alternative investing, tax mitigation, and secrets to build wealth that the textbooks don't teach you. Whether you're looking to enhance your financial literacy, discover new investment opportunities, or simply find a better way to manage your money, this is the place where your financial health is the core of our conversations. Welcome to Wealth Beyond the White Coat, where your journey to financial clarity and freedom begins. All right, welcome to Wealth Beyond the White Coat, Episode 1. I'm Dr. Deren Flesher, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Ross Brannon. We wanted to just spend a little bit of time here getting to share who we are and why we're doing this. So, Ross, why don't you give a quick little, well, maybe not quick, but an introduction on yourself, whatever's relevant to the journey to get to recording this podcast with me, and then I'll do the same for myself.
I'm the former host of the Financial Flossing podcast, which was recently shut down and have just pivoted to Wealth Beyond the White Coat with Deren. Financial Flossing was a tremendous success to the point where Joe Rogan had reached out to me personally to shut it down because it was competing with his download numbers. That's obviously a joke, in case you couldn't figure that out. But Deren and I have known each other for, like 4 or 5 years now, met in some circles that we'll talk about on the show, and have both learned a lot and just want to share our experiences and some good, some bad with everyone, just to educate them out there. And so we're pretty excited about this. We're going to bring a lot of cool people on and hope to educate everyone.
Yeah, the entire purpose of this show is education around alternative investing, tax mitigation strategies, just ways for dentists and healthcare professionals to both potentially earn more with their savings and passive income, but also to keep more of their active income. I've had quite a journey myself, just organically through all these concepts. And through the process here, I feel like from my end, kind of being a layman, and Ross's end, being a financial professional, we can aggregate best practices and share them with a larger audience here. So that's the goal for us. A little bit about me. I'm a dentist by trade, practice owner. And so when people ask me what I do or who I am, that's the easy answer. But in truth, there's a bigger answer to it. I've owned local businesses, restaurants, cannabis. I've had passive income through other opportunities that are not local, most of which have gone well, but some of which haven't. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that in the show. And all of it's been a learning process on do's and don'ts and ways to maybe better approach this. And so through our network and our experience, we will bring on sponsors and guests who have a vast background and a wealth of knowledge in all these aspects of investing and income. And we'll share those with you. Some of them might have opportunities on the back end that would be worth pursuing for you, but that's not the point of what we're trying to do on this show. We just want to share information and try to get the distilled version of best practices on how to approach all of this.
Let's jump right in, Deren. Let's
Yeah.
give them a background. So, about 4 or 5 years ago, Deren and I met in what we'll call an investing club. And it was an alternative investing club. And my background was as a financial advisor, which I loathe that term, in the traditional side. When I say traditional side, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, managed accounts, insurance, things of that nature. And I was invited to be a part of this investing club because I needed someone like me there to help people because people had needs in that regard. But it was basically an investment club, alternative investment club. And it was interesting because I'd never seen anything like this before. And one of the things they talked a lot about was tax planning, using alternative investments as a tax plan. So Daren and I met along the way, and I think we both found it fairly interesting. And it was a good run for a little while, wouldn't you say, Daren?
Yeah, agreed.
So we found it educational and began expanding our thought process in that regard. Unfortunately, as time went on, it was time for Darren to leave and time for me to leave due to circumstances. Quite frankly, just felt like it wasn't for us anymore. But along the way and afterwards, a lot of things that we thought were good turned out to be not so good. And we've had a lot of friends lose money in things that were shiny object at the time, sounded good, but weren't. And Darren and I both lost some money in some of those things to different levels. We also have friends who have lost well into the seven figures on doing what we would say bad deals. And so Darren and I, as we built a relationship and friendship, we just felt like we both went down this educational road from two different angles, during, and post that investment club. And then we reconnected and we just felt a burden to educate people. It's really a challenging environment out there. There's a lot of websites and there's a lot of groups for physicians and dentists. And the most famous one is the White Coat Investor, and that's a very popular blog website, and they do put a lot of great content out. People love him or hate him, it doesn't matter, but he's doing put a lot of content out, but it's more traditional. When we say traditional, we mean typically stock market based or disability and life insurance based. But what we have found is that a lot of people just aren't enamored with the stock market. Especially if you're a dentist and you own a practice, the highest rate of return we would argue is putting a dollar back into your business. And so for those types of people, if you're a business owner, typically the only market-based investments you have are in a company 401k. Not always the case, but many times the case. And so people who own their own business tend to be more interested in other types of private investments. Now, what Darren and I have learned along the way is that the vast majority of private investment offered to dentists and doctors or dentists and physicians tend to be not the best. And I've got some really strong opinions on this that I'll withhold for later. But Darren, give them your perspective on this.
Yeah. So my original journey and how we got here is I've always pursued things outside of my practice. I've always just liked to have multiple plates spinning, and I don't know if I get bored easily or just like to have multiple opportunities at a time. But through the process, I've had other jobs as dental directors for insurance companies or DSOs, but I've also founded a couple software companies, one of which I exited back in 2021 for a large payday there. And so that was my original foray into how do I keep more of this money. I realize I got this big check and Uncle Sam's going to come asking for a significant part of that next year. What can I do in the meantime to maybe keep more of it or put it to work for me to earn more on it or both? And so that was my original process and journey to how we got here. So as part of that, I sought out things. We'll get into these specific strategies later, but things like opportunity zones when you have a long-term capital gain, selling a practice, selling a business that you've had for more than a year. If you deploy it into certain offerings, you can actually defer and at some level avoid some taxes on the gains that you get from that investment. Through that, I was looking for options and investments and couldn't find any. So actually, in truth, I ended up eating that tax bill. And it wasn't the end of the world, but it wasn't what I was trying to gain through that process. And it led me down this journey of trying to find optionality in the future. And through this process, found the investing group that you talked about. Like you said, it had some good and some bad. But through that process, I continued to self educate, connected with other smart people like yourself, and learned that there might be some best practices here that just from an opinion standpoint, we feel is the best way forward. And anyway, that's what we wanted to get to this podcast and share our aggregated best practices and things we've learned over the last handful of years on through our own individual experiences, collectively bringing that together and hopefully fast forwarding a lot of people's education on the good, the bad, and the ugly of what this can be and getting people on the right road if they do want to pursue the things that I've pursued that have ultimately led to quite a bit of success, but through a little bit of trial and tribulation along the way. Hey, I just want to interrupt real quick and say thanks for listening to the podcast. If you didn't know, we have an associated Facebook group also called Wealth Beyond the White Coat. Over there, you can ask your questions, get feedback from group members, and have a close community of medical professionals who are likely interested in the same things as you. Whether it's alternative investing, tax mitigation, ways to keep more of your money, or even protect your assets, we're going to discuss those things in the group. Additionally, we have a private investors club called Legacy Point. As a member, you'll get exclusive discounts to preferred vendors, and you'll get access to private investments that you'll find nowhere else. Whether it's hotels, apartments, oil and gas, equipment rental, you name it, we'll be discussing those details and offering those investments to members only inside Legacy Point Group. If you want to learn more about that, please contact me or simply email info, INFO, at legacypointgroup.com or go to the website legacypointgroup.com. And Wealth Beyond the White Coat podcast listeners get an exclusive discount if you use the code WealthBeyond. That's all caps, all together, Wealth Beyond at checkout. I'd love to have you in the group, and I'd love to see you making more passive income as you move towards financial freedom, whether it's freedom to retire early, spend more time with your family, go on more vacations, or just do more of what you love while you're in the operatory. I'd love to see you doing that as part of Legacy Point. So here's to improving your financial health.
And we would argue that the highest rate of return someone's going to get is a dollar taken back from the IRS legally. And so, if there's ways to legally reduce your tax, and by the way, there's lots of them, then we want to pursue that. Now, what Darren and I first experienced was ways that weren't necessarily, they weren't illegal, but they were very gray. And we want to avoid that. And so the stuff we're going to talk about is fairly black and white. It's straight in the code. And so the challenge, though, we have seen, and we've got friends dealing with this right now. We've seen people spend a dollar to save 40 cents, but they end up losing that dollar. They're better off paying the tax than losing the whole dollar. And you can't let the tax tail wave the investment dog. It has to be a good investment, regardless of the tax benefits. And that's what we're going to talk about. But there's just a lot of bad information out there. And quite frankly, there's a lot of bad ecosystems out there. And there's a lot of bad people out there. And so we're going to talk about due diligence. And here's the ugly truth. No one listening to this podcast is qualified to do your own due diligence. You don't know what you're doing. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try, but there are third-party law firms that do this due diligence. And in the ecosystem that Darren and I are talking about, that's what we have. Everything that we're going to talk about is fully vetted. From the ecosystem that Darren and I came from, nothing was vetted. Nothing. And what we have found is that the vast majority, and by vast, 99% of sponsors, people raising capital that go directly to the retail public, you are bad apples. Darren and I would argue we know one person who was not a bad apple. And quite frankly, he comes from our ecosystem. That's a longer story for another day. And he's a top quality guy. But everybody else, it's just a disaster. In fact, Darren and I have seen 2 or 3 Ponzi schemes in the last 3 years, one of which has not been blown up or exposed yet. One of which that is fully blown up, FBI, DOJ are fully involved in. And what the challenging thing is, a lot of these programs, people put debt on them, lever them up to get a better deduction, and they have debt service on a Ponzi scheme now. So now they're trying to sue a bank, but good luck winning that argument to deal with the debt. It's a really challenging situation. And we're here just to help people not make those mistakes. And something else that's really frustrating from Darren and I's perspective is we know people paying tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a part of these groups offering these bad Ponzi schemes. In fact, I know a guy I talked to last week who bought 13 turnkey rentals that were supposedly rehabbed all across the United States. This guy lives in Georgia, and he's found out that none of these houses were rehabbed. So he's now trying to sell a house that wasn't rehabbed in the middle of nowhere, South Carolina, which is not easy to do. And so he's trying to figure this out, sort through all this stuff, and all of a sudden now he might be losing money in this situation. In fact, Darren sent me an article about a multifamily sponsor who was basically going belly up, and all these doctors and dentists have invested with him. And it's important that people understand what syndication is. So if there is an apple pie for sale and I go buy the apple pie, then I slice it up, mark up the price on the slices, and sell you the slices, that's syndication. I'm a syndicator. Okay. I am syndicating something. But in most of the problems that we see, not all, but most of the problems that we see are with syndicators. They got some hustle to them, but they don't have the experience many times. They don't have the deep pockets of the capital. And if things are going well, like 0% interest rates for 10 years, they can pull it off. But once things start changing, they go sideways. We don't want to deal with syndicators. We want to deal with the baker, someone who is manufacturing the asset or baking the pie. That's what we deal with. So I think it's important to understand that. And we can't stress enough how much our desire really here is to educate and protect people because it is Darren and I text every day and probably 2 or 3 days a week. It's a war story that someone's texted us.
Hey, I just wanted to interrupt the show real quick and tell you about an exclusive member discount for Legacy Point Group members. The company is called Gelt, and they're both tax planning and tax preparation. We connected because their CEO actually comes from a family of physicians, and he understands the financial complexities that healthcare professionals face these days. Legacy Point is honored to partner with Gelt because it's our shared mission to empower successful professionals with optimal tax and financial outcomes. For your 20% discount off financial planning and tax preparation and priority access with their onboarding, become a member over at legacypointgroup.com. Yeah, I wanted to circle back to a couple things you mentioned and maybe add to them a little bit. So, you touched about other groups charging a high fee. We're literally going to give it away for free here. We want people to truly get this education and a high level version of it through us, through this podcast for free. We feel like that part should be shared. There might be some opportunity to get more information or get access to those deals outside of us, but for the purposes of just getting people base level of education and on the journey to maybe ask more questions and take their own path, that's what we want to provide here. You also mentioned the white coat investor and what with their approach here. I truly believe that there's room for that in your portfolio. I don't think that anybody would be wise to have too much allocation to any one type of investment or any one sponsor
Well,
in
and
our
let me
world.
interrupt you, Darren. If
Yeah.
you're dealing with a professional in this industry, they have compliance requirements.
Yeah.
You can't invest more than 30% of your net worth unless you have a net worth outside of your house over $5 million. And if you do that, if you want to invest more than 30% of your net worth, you have to sign what we call a big boy form, where you basically admit what you are doing, acknowledge what you are doing, and take full responsibility for that. And all these bad actors,
Yeah.
besides the fact that they're breaking securities laws, none of them do that or even know that.
Yeah. I think that's important. I think it's important to be well-rounded, both yourself, but also the people that you are trusting to give you the advice. If they're not giving you rounded and evenly distributed advice across different offerings and asset classes and all that kind of stuff, you probably need to reconsider who you're talking to. I also want to talk about kind of two things together here. Coming back to my story, how we got here, why I'm doing what I'm doing. My first round of a big exit, didn't find the opportunity, found some things that technically checked the boxes on opportunity zones, but the investment itself, I could see through it and saw that it wasn't going to lead me anywhere that I wanted to go from a return standpoint if I was going to return anything. What you talked about with the saving 40 cents but losing the dollar, I didn't want to go down that road. So I ate the tax there. But in the meantime, have built and now sold a significant part of my dental practice. And that's how we ended up getting connected here, specifically on some of these new opportunities. I've personally deployed a ton of money into these things because I've learned enough to know what's good, to trust them. I've seen the due diligence that goes into these offerings. I've seen the level and quality of sponsor. I've seen their history and the volume in which they operate to know that they're real. They've got a track record. They've got a lot of heavy hitters as far as other co investors with them. there's a lot more to what we are going to talk about here compared to what I'd seen in the past with small operations, single offerings. There's some of that it had all the bells and whistles and was enticing from what it offered me from a tax perspective, but the big picture wasn't there for me. And through us connecting and staying connected over the last few years, have seen bigger, better things, realize that the real, personally put a lot of my own time and money into those offerings. And so those are the types of people we want to bring here to educate our listeners on what separates them from others in the space, and why people should want to maybe lean on their expertise and education to feel comfortable with what we're doing and talking about here.
And just to give some greater context, I told you back in the beginning, I was when we 4 or 5 years ago, I was a traditional financial advisor, stock market based insurance, things like that. And as I went down this road, I came to the conclusion, I was like, you don't know if you do good retirement planning if it's probably for 2 or 3 decades. You don't know if you do good investment planning for a decade. You don't know if you do good insurance planning unless something catastrophic happens. So what's the highest value you can bring someone? It's saving money on taxes. They'll know by April 15th or October 15th. And so I decided to go down the wormhole of learning more and more about tax. And along those ways, along that route, I discovered what I'm going to call the real ecosystem of alternative investments versus the fraudulent world of alternative investments, which I would argue that Darren and I met in what I'm going to call the fraudulent world of alternative investments. And please hear me, not everything is fraudulent when I say that, but it's not up to snuff compared to the things that we're in now. And so through and I walked away from my traditional financial advisor world and only deal in the alternative investment world that is the creme de la creme, the top of the ecosystem, where we deal with billion-dollar sponsors. And lots of these have tax benefits, which is what Darren's talking about, whether it's opportunity zones or whether it's getting your income tax down or things like that. But it is it has been an eye-opening experience over the past few years seeing the real world versus what I'm calling the less than real world. And it's exciting because now Darren and I put our own money in all these deals, and I tell people what is available in this ecosystem, and they don't believe me. Then I start showing it to them, and they're like blown away. And so our goal is to bring some of the sponsors on to educate people on what the ecosystem, the asset class is like, to have due diligence professionals like law firms that do due diligence come out, talk about things, and educate people. And it's our belief that once people hear this, their eyes are going to be open to what's available to them and might dip their toe in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably about a good place to wrap up. I do want to lay out our potential path forward here. A lot of episodes are going to be me and or Ross talking with some of these sponsors, letting them bring you their expertise in their field, nothing to sell you with their appearance on our show. And occasionally it'll just be him and or me talking about concepts or related aspects to what we've brought with the sponsor. And then Ross also has some partners in what he does, and they might help us participate, interview people, and we'll share that with you as well. I want to thank you guys for listening to episode 1 here. We are excited to bring a lot of great content and a lot of great education to you here in the future.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for listening in to Wealth Beyond the White Coat. Your time and attention mean a lot to us. If you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share it with your colleagues and friends. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more professionals like you striving for financial freedom. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of your financial health. Thank you for joining us on this journey to wealth beyond the white coat.